Hi, welcome to Ageless Island, your destination for staying strong, sharp, and ageless. Today, I'm going to talk to you about something that happened to me with my toe this summer. I was out on a typical walk with my husband, Sam, and my toe just started hurting. When I went up on it to bend it felt like I had a cramp and needed to pop. I wasn't sure. So I limped for about 10 minutes. Then it worked its way out, and it was okay for a while. Then it progressively got worse and worse and worse where to put my tennis shoe on, where I had to bend my toes. It was painful. I dreaded taking off my shoe because I knew it was going to hurt. I got to where I had to unlace my shoelaces all the way to even get my foot in. So I didn't know what was going on. I went to a foot doctor and they took a look at it, did x-rays, and he told me that I had no space in my toe joint, that I had arthritis, that I had a bone spur, and all he could do was fuse it. And I'm very active. I love to do a bear hold. I like to do lunges. I love my Zumba, and it was really impacting everything I did, including even walking. I would have to 15 minutes to warm up before I wasn't limping on my toe. And this doctor told me all he could do was fuse my toe surgically. Nothing else could be done. And that he wanted to give me a cortisone shot. And they said, well, I don't want a cortisone shot because that destroys your cartilage. And I want to keep what I have. And needless to say, it didn't go well. I didn't go back to him, but I needed to do something. So I started doing a lot of research. And this is what leads me to today's podcast. So I'm going to talk about something that not a lot of doctors out there are talking about. So I ended up going down a rabbit hole because I wanted to find something that would work for my toe that wasn't an NSAID, that wasn't cortisone, and definitely not a toe fusion. And the more I researched, the more I started hearing about these things called peptides. So a lot of you know peptides from weight loss, and there's just peptides out there that do all sorts of things. Before we get started on it, though, again, this isn't medical advice. This is just my experiences, and I want to tell you what happened to me in case you all have something similar or you know somebody that might have the same problems. Consult your doctor if you do decide to look into these any further. Most of what I'm going to talk about today are considered research peptides, not for human use. And most of the data out there is preclinical animal studies, not a lot of human trials. It's also not approved by the FDA. Again, just my story. But the evidence out there does look really promising. And based on my experience alone, I had to share it with you. So you might wonder, what is a peptide? So what it is a short chain of amino acids. It is your body's own signaling molecules. It's used to influence healing, anti-inflammation, hormone signaling, and tissue repair. It's really cool because since they were created in a body, they speak the language your body already knows how to speak. They signal your body in a way your body can understand. It's very gentle. They make things happen. They remind your body to do things that your body used to do that maybe it doesn't do so well anymore because whatever part of your body that created these signals in the past isn't as robust as it was when we were younger. So I'm going to talk about two specific peptides today. One is BPC-157 and one is TB-500. So you might wonder, well, what's the difference between pharmaceuticals and peptides? So with pharmaceuticals, so I'm talking like your Aleve, your Advil, they act more like a bouncer at the door. They're effective. Their job is to block something from getting in. It'll stop a reaction. It suppresses a signal or it shuts down a pathway. It's really blunt, effective, and it doesn't care about what else gets blocked in the meantime. So it can lead to other side effects. Peptides, on the other hand, are more like an orchestra conductor. So even though it doesn't play and they don't play an instrument, they direct the systems to do what they're designed to do. So in your body, it directs the signals to turn on something, turn a signal back on. Nothing is being forced, nothing's being blocked, just like the music is playing better. The peptides also have a different risk profile because they work with our biology instead of shutting down something or overriding our biology. They're more familiar to the body, so they're less likely to trigger some kind of immune response. Where most pharmaceuticals, because they block or inhibit pathways, for instance, all of us know about the NSAIDs or corticosteroids, they typically carry real risk like GI bleeding, kidney strain, cartilage degradation with long-term use. So those are all things you don't want to happen and things that we haven't seen with peptide use. So starting with BPC-157, a really weird term for something we would put in our bodies. It means, though, body protection compound 157, which is created naturally from a protein that occurs in the stomach. BPC-157 shows strong, decades-long healing results in animal studies and even human safety signals, but again, it lacks robust human trials. However, the really interesting thing and thing that makes me feel good about 157 is there's no lethal dose that has been achieved in animal studies, and no organ toxicity has ever been seen. So what that means, they keep giving these animals more and more and more of this BPC-157 to see what's going to kill them, and they haven't found a dose that kills them. So, try that with an Aleve and see what happens. So some of the things that BPC may help with, first of all, these two peptides I'm going to talk about, I inject subcutaneously. I'll talk about that more later in the video. But this one particular area, the gut and microbiome, can benefit from oral BPC-157. Since it is created in the gut, it can withstand the stomach acids. So if you have leaky gut or IBS or something going on internally in your stomach, it actually may be helpful for that even in an oral form. It'll help improve the tight junctions of your gut lining. It'll improve the barrier function. It can increase good bacteria while decreasing bad bacteria. It has some really good metabolic effects. It can improve your insulin sensitivity. It'll help your body move sugar in and out of the blood and into cells more efficiently so the cells can use that energy. It helps with nitric oxide in circulation. So this stimulates nitric oxide production, which can lead to relaxing your blood vessels, which will improve your circulation overall. And then angiogenesis. You're going to hear this term a lot today. And I don't know, I'd heard it, but I didn't really know what it was before I started looking into peptides. But this is the formation of new blood vessels. And what this does for your body is it improves your oxygen delivery to your wound. It gives nutrient delivery to those same wounds or injuries and takes the waste away. So it's not just healing, it actually is optimizing the environment for healing. This also accelerates repair through fibroblast activity. So what fibroblasts are cells that are used to produce collagen and maintain tissue structure. They turn up your body's natural repair growth signals. There was a researcher, Sekirik, who has said that this improvement, and this is very promising and interesting, that in animal studies, that these improvements actually looked structural and ongoing, not just temporary. So if the results I'm seeing from BPC-157 can be permanent fixes, instead of just, I take something and it mask it for a while and then it comes back. This could be amazing. Then musculoskeletal recovery, it forms stronger, more normal bone. Immune balance. Chronically inflamed people, they have forgotten how to turn off the attack of their cytokines, which are the inflammation signals in your body. So BPC-157 comes in and reminds your body how to calm down and how to calm the inflammation. So it does this by increasing something called IL-10, which is an anti-inflammatory cytokine. Again, remember back in the COVID days when all they were talking about was cytokine storms in your body. And part of the problem was your body was over-responding to COVID and causing this overactive anti-inflammatory response. And that was what was really hurting people, that they couldn't slow down this response. Another thing that BPC-157 does is it supports regulatory T cells, which are your immune system's peacekeepers. It also increases level of, I've never heard of this before, heat shock proteins, specifically HSP70 is what they're called. So what they do is they act kind of as chaperones that help fold misfolded proteins correctly. So when you have a misfolded protein, it could lead to all sorts of bad things in your body, especially you hear about this mostly in terms of dementia and Alzheimer's, but also any tissue in your body, it can cause negative effects. As far as the brain and nervous system goes, it does cross the blood-brain barrier, and in animal studies, it suggests it boosts BNDF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This is fertilizer for our brain. Helps with memory, potentially helps with learning. It can reduce neuroinflammatory recovery and reduce neurological stress. So getting to that, nervous system balance. It can influence your vagus nerve and shift your body out of the fight or flight into the more parasympathetic rest and repair state. So this can help you regulate cortisol, which can also lead to weight gain and other problematic things. It can reduce your chronic stress signaling. It can improve your recovery and also shift your body, again, out of that chronic fight or flight. As far as lung and tissue repair, it can reduce inflammation in your lungs. It can improve the barrier in your lungs just like it does in your intestines, and this will help support oxygen exchange. Now for the next peptide, TB-500 and its benefits. And it does a lot of things that sound very similar, but they work in a little bit different ways. So TB-500 can support tissue repair and wound healing. It accelerates the closure of wounds and also any damaged tissue. It can support the repair of muscle, tendon, and ligaments. And this is how it's really different. It works systemically, so it affects your whole body. It's not just local to the injury site like BPC-157 is. So it is responsible for cell migration and remodeling to the injury. It moves cells where they need to be. And it does this by regulating something called actin, which is a protein that provides cell structure. It helps the cells move efficiently to the injury and helps the tissue remodeling after an injury. It also helps with collagen and structural repair. Again, fibroblast activity, the same way as BPC-157. It creates a stronger, more organized tissue and less scar tissue. It works alongside BPC-157's local repair, signaling for broader structural support. It also modulates inflammation. Again, there's the inflammation, getting rid of inflammation. Both of these peptides really work on that. And that's one of the most critical things that both of these peptides do. So it affects suppression of both acute and chronic inflammation. It can reduce the pro-inflammatory cytokines again, and it can resolve inflammation, not just suppress it. So it can actually just make it go away. And this is system-wide. It also improves immune surveillance, which is done by supporting your natural killer cells or NK cell activity. These are your immune system's primary patrol units, so they go out and help detect and destroy any abnormal or pre-malignant cancer cells. It also helps your body to maintain immune responsiveness, but without triggering an overreaction like a cytokine storm. And then again, angiogenesis and circulation, so the formation of new blood vessels. So this again helps with oxygen delivery to your healing tissues, gives your parasites more nutrients, and removes the waste and byproducts. So this is really important. This angiogenesis is core to how these peptides heal. But it's also why there's some concern that we're going to talk about later in this podcast about cancer. It can help with musculoskeletal recovery. It will help your muscle cells switch into repair and recovery mode. And early animal studies even suggest improved recovery from muscle tears, connective tissue damage, and bone injury. Both of these work differently, though. So even though a lot of the same things were said about the two peptides, BPC-157 rebuilds the area. TB-500 helps the body deliver the repair team. So they're often used together for more synergistic effects. So that brings us to the next topic, which is the Wolverine blend. So if you've heard anything about peptides other than weight loss, you've heard of the Wolverine blend. What this is a pre-mixed vial of BPC-157 with TB-500. So combining the two peptides support healing in the two different ways that they're good at. So BPC-157, fast-acting, targeted healing, goes to where it's needed, and BP-500, longer-lasting, system-wide support, and gets the cells where they're needed to go. And why they're combined. So there are benefits to combining them. It makes it really simple, especially if you're new to peptides. You don't want to give yourself a shot. It's one vial, one injection, you're done. It's also really convenient. So again, new users, it's a really easy way to get started. And for me, I went Wolverine blend first because of all of those same things. I was really nervous about it, and this was a really easy way to get started. But it gets complicated because the two peptides don't behave in the same way in the body. So there's the half-life issue. BPC-157 has a really short half-life, and it doesn't stay in the system very long. So it's very well used daily, where TB-500 has a longer half-life and it stays in the body longer. So it lends itself more to being a twice or 3 times a week type of peptide. So if you're combining them and taking them daily, you're not really getting TB-500 as it was originally designed to be in your system when it was in its TB4 molecule. So that matters in a blend because you're getting small amounts of TB-500 daily instead of the larger spaced out doses that the body's used to seeing. So you might not be maximizing its systemic effect. Also, you might be using more TB-500 than you actually need to because you don't need to use it every day. And you might not be getting the biological effect from the TB-500 because it behaves more like a repair signal than a daily supplement. So in its parent protein that I was talking about, it's called TB4. it pulses when there's an injury. It doesn't just constantly like flood the body. So there's that. And then a lot of repair pathways uh, need a certain level of signal to actually be effective. So you may not be hitting that level, and your body really needs to have TB-500 make as big of an impact as it would be if it was a higher dose twice or three times a week. So it is ultimately a convenient approach, and I definitely would do that versus not doing anything. So I'm really glad that that's what I got started with. But if you separate them, it allows more flexibility, and you can use the peptides more how they were intended to be used in nature. So I need to get to another problem that we're hearing about with peptides, and this is FDA restrictions. Unfortunately, but typical of some of the post-COVID FDA decisions, in 2023, the FDA took a look at some of the compounded peptides, things like BPC-157, TB-500, and some other popular ones. And they said, we don't really have enough data here. There's not a lot of human studies. So we're going to put these peptides on what's called a category 2 list. So basically, what they said they were saying was that these peptides might carry safety risk. So compounding pharmacies need to be very cautious or avoid them. And they said their concerns were there weren't enough human studies, that there was not enough quality control to look at what the peptides really were and the impurities in them, and again, no long-term human studies. But critics of the FDA restrictions say, the agency really didn't provide data to say that any patients actually suffered immune-related harm from these peptides. And thanks to their decision, it's now harder to get peptides from a trusted source like a compounded pharmacy who is actually looking at things like quality control and impurities. And it's pushed people to what's called the gray market. So there's a lot of peptide sites out on the internet. They're research only. They say not for human use, but it's their way of getting around these restrictions. And also, healthcare providers and doctors are more cautious about using them. So these things were actually helping people. People were recovering from injuries faster. People were not in pain. And now doctors are afraid to use them because there have been restrictions put on them. So be interested in the comments why you think the FDA put them in this Cat 2 category instead of leaving them on Cat 1 where they were. But I've got good news. Hot off the press, April 15th, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration announced some changes. So they want to put into formal review starting in July of 2026, 14 out of 19 of the restricted peptides. So they're going to be reevaluated for safety data and hopefully taken off the Cat 2 list and put back on the Cat 1 list, which will make it legal again for compounding pharmacies to provide them. Situation is still evolving. They have been taken off the Cat 2 list, but they're not on the Cat 1 list, so they're kind of in a state of limbo right now. So as I hear more about this, I'll let you know if I get any interesting information. I might put a short out about this. An important side note, make sure you trust your source if you decide to research with peptides. Gray market peptides do carry real risk of impurities and not having the right amount in the vial that they say they have. So be sure that they're third-party testing. Be sure you do your research on these companies and make sure they've been around to have a good reputation. Then the other thing about these peptides, I've had some friends ask me, I really want to try this, but somebody told me that there's a potential risk for cancer because of the angiogenesis or the creation of blood vessels. So it's a fair question, and I wanted to look at that in this podcast because I've heard this from a couple of people now. So there are three main cancer drivers. So first is DNA damage, which is dysregulated growth signals, and cells stop following the rules. They stop acting like they're supposed to act. Then there's immune escape, where cancer cells are evading the very system that was designed to detect and kill them. So that's like the NK cells. So in addition, and this is according to Dr. Trevor Bachmeyer, he's somebody I watch on YouTube. He has a lot of really good scientific information if you'd like to take a deeper dive on any of these peptides. Interesting character, but has really good information. But what he says is there's a few biological conditions that seem to amplify cancer risk and actually any disease out there, any chronic disease. So that is chronic inflammation, high blood sugar, insulin resistance, and mitochondrial dysfunction. So when your cells can't produce enough energy to be efficient and things start to fail or go wrong in your system. So this also pertains back to another video I did on methylene blue. So if you haven't watched that, I talk about mitochondria support and getting more energy from your mitochondria using methylene blue and oxygen to your brain. I will put a link in my notes. So if you want to check out that video, you'll be able to. So back to cancer. In my opinion, a better question to ask is, do the peptides influence your body systems in a way that makes cancer more or less likely to occur? So I'm not claiming any of these peptides treat cancer or even prevent cancer. I just think we need to look at it in a different way. We need to look at the direction the biology points to and how these particular peptides actually function in your system. So here's where BPC-157 may impact some of the systems that are relevant to cancer. So on inflammation, this is where it stands out the most. Animal studies suggest that it quiets your body's main inflammation switch. So it shifts your immune system from fight or fight into repair mode. Chronic inflammation is one of the amplifiers of cancer risk. So that is mechanistically a favorable signal, again, in animal data, but it looks promising. As far as blood sugar and metabolism, it doesn't work like a glucose drug, but it supports your gut healing and reduces inflammation. Research even suggests that it can improve the handling of insulin and glucose. There was one animal study that reported an 87% improvement in insulin sensitivity in metabolic tissue. So if that translates into human biology, that would be so meaningful and such a link between metabolic dysfunction and cancer. So hopefully somebody will do some more studies and include humans on this one. As far as mitochondria go, there's evidence that it may protect your mitochondria function and even encourage the production of new mitochondria. Again, this is important for your whole body because every cell has mitochondria. That's how the energy is produced in your body and keeps your whole body running. So giving your cells better energy production and capacity would be a fantastic change. So this matters, again, because cancer cells exploit metabolic weaknesses. There's something called the Warburg effect. This is where cells abandon their normal oxidative energy production in favor of less efficient anaerobic processes. This is called the Warburg effect. It was named after Otto Warburg. He discovered this in 1931 and won the Nobel Prize. So it's a theory that an environment where healthy cells are metabolically robust and thrive is an environment where cancer cells are going to have a harder time getting a foothold. So we're looking at, can BPC-157 and TB-500 provide that kind of environment where cancer cells do have a hard time taking hold? So in cancer and tumor suppression, there have been some animal studies concerning a protein called P53, which is basically the cell suicide button. It is supposed to trigger programmed cell death if the cell is abnormal. So, basically gets rid of cancer or precancer type of cells. So in this 2017 study using BPC-157, it showed that it might help activate the P53 by reducing the protein that normally degrades it. There's also research suggesting that it might enhance the activity of the killer cells and the T cells. Again, these are what go out and kill the cancer cells or seek them out. They're also your immune system's primary patrol units for identifying and destroying pre-malignant cells. And they also promote the Treg cells that prevent those same immune cells from going rogue and attacking healthy tissue. There's another study that shows that BPC-157 may actually slow cell division of cancer cells by around 55% in cell lines. Again, this was in a petri dish, so if it translates to animals or humans, again, huge. Even if it's not 55%, if it does it at all, that's amazing. So it dials down the growth signal of these malignant cells. Then in other animal models, researchers reported an 80% reduction in metastatic breast cancer in one of their studies. Then another 65% reduction in tumor growth in colon cancer model over an 8-week study. Again, in animal studies and cell line data only. So they don't always translate to human biology, but it is very interesting research. Now let's get back to TB-500 because it requires a little bit more unpacking than the BPC-157. There's some common misconceptions with TB-500. So first of all, we've got to address that TB-500 is a 7 amino acid fragment that is made from a larger naturally occurring molecule called thymosin beta-4. It has 43 amino acids. So what scientists did was they specifically took the fragment from the TB4 that's responsible for cell migration and healing and created TB-500. So when you hear claims that TB-500 has been responsible or shown in cancer studies, they're really referring to this larger parent peptide called thymosin beta-4, which is overexpressed in certain cancers. So that can make you worry, but this is what these studies actually showed, and this is important to note. So first, in every case, the cancer cells themselves were producing the thymosin beta 4. It wasn't the result of an external injection. So the cells were creating them. Also, it functions as a biomarker of an already existing aggressive tumor. It doesn't cause that tumor to occur. There's no evidence that taking it caused cancer. You can think of it kind of like PSA and prostate cancer. So PSA tracks with the disease, but it isn't the cause of it. So, second, and this almost never gets mentioned, is in the studies, they used the full TB4 molecule, not the TB5 fragment. So, the specific domains in TB4 that are associated with the concerning cancer findings were not present in the shorter piece of the TB500 fragment. And third, study quality matters. So the concern originated largely from small lab studies that were done in a petri dish. And TB500's most relevant cancer contribution is probably that it supports the surveillance of the NK killer cells by keeping them active. So the NK cells, like I said, are the immune system's front line for detecting and clearing pre-malignant cells before they establish. And TB500 supports these cells. Studies also show that TB500 also reduces inflammatory cytokines. So the real concern here for both of these peptides is, do they promote angiogenesis? And yes, they do. And that's the core to why they heal tissue. And tumors also depend on new blood vessels to grow and spread. So that's where the concern is. But you also have to remember that tumors can create their own blood vessels. So they don't need either of these peptides to create blood vessels. They can do that all on their own. And they are usually like this crazy mess of vessels. They're not done in an organized manner. TB-500 and BPC-157 both go in and create very organized blood vessels that go in to heal the system the way it's supposed to be done. It's not unregulated growth. So the concern isn't whether or not these peptides cause cancer. The concern is more specific. Could they accelerate cancer growth in a tumor that already exists? So the risk is theoretically plausible. Again, we don't have long-term human data. So if you have active cancer or recent cancer, definitely talk to your oncologist before you try either of these peptides. So when you look at the 6 main axes of cancer that we discussed, 4 of them go in a more favorable direction when you add these peptides, because studies have shown that they can help your inflammation go down. They can help your metabolic health. They can protect your mitochondria and actually increase your mitochondria and boost your immune system surveillance. The only 2 that really warrant caution is the angiogenesis, the blood vessel creation, and the absence of long-term human data. So the bottom line is promising, but human data is essentially non-existent, and we really need to get that data as well. And then you have to look at the distinction between the full TB4 molecule and the fragment TB500, because that distinction matters a lot when you're talking about cancer risk, and it almost never gets discussed. Again, got to remind you, everything I've described here mostly comes from animal and cell models and anecdotal human information that I've heard from other people and myself. So these peptides have not been studied in human trials in the context of cancer risk or cancer prevention. So then here's the other question I get, and the big question I had is, where do you even get peptides? And I was really cautious at first. I wanted to be sure I got something that I was going to be putting in my body that was clean, that wasn't going to hurt me. So I asked around. I asked at the gym. Nobody at the gym had even really heard about peptides. Everybody was talking about stem cells. Then a friend of mine pointed me to a local chiropractor. Her name is Melissa Harmon, and she got me set up with a research study where they actually use a legitimate compounding pharmacy. And she was so helpful. And I got signed up, and about a week later, all my supplies came. It included everything I needed. It included the needles, the alcohol, the bacteriostatic water, all the vials I needed for a 6-week cycle. So it was super convenient and easy, but it was a little bit pricey, but it worked very well. So I was really nervous at first to give myself a shot, because I'd never done that before. I never even watched myself get a shot or watched a blood test go in my arm. But luckily, they don't go in the muscle. They're little tiny, tiny diabetes needles. And you pinch your skin, and you don't want to go into the muscle. Once I did it a couple times, it was so much easier than I thought it would be. And now I'm going to give them to my husband, Sam, and sometimes to my mom. Quick note, I did find out, because her needles were very good, and then I ordered some from Amazon next time, and they weren't very sharp. So I ended up going to a diabetes warehouse to get some needles that were a lot sharper than Amazon provided. So the first round, this is what I found. So within 5 days, remember that pain on putting my tennis shoes on and having to walk? I was able to walk without any warm up. I still had some pain putting on my shoe, but it wasn't as bad. I didn't have to lace it all the way up. And second week, I didn't really notice anything else, but I still didn't have as bad of pain. But the third week was like magic. That was when everything really kicked in. I didn't have to lace my shoe hardly at all. I didn't even think about taking my shoe on or off. I could walk. I got back to being able to do my workouts. I didn't have to make exceptions like putting a Bosu ball under my toes so they didn't bend. I was able to do pretty much everything I was able to do before my toes started hurting. So, and it just continually improved up to the 6-week period. And after that, I wanted to take a 4-week break because I'd heard you cycle most peptides. And during that break, I did some more research because I wanted to continue on peptides. And I also wanted to get my husband taking them because he has bone on bone shoulder and arthritis in the shoulder. And I thought that would help his pain. And he recently had a surgery and didn't want to go under and get shoulder surgery so soon after the other one. So we wanted to delay it if possible. So I wanted to find some less pricey options. So I did start looking into the gray market. So again, these are the companies online that use for research only, not for human use. But many of them, or not many of them, I'd say a lot of them did have third-party testing. So I did look at that. You look to see if they come from reputable labs or not. And also look at their reviews. Look at if they've been around for a long time. I did a lot of research and narrowed it down to like 3 companies that I thought I could trust and that I've used now. And I've had good experiences with all of them. Some better than others. Some I think maybe have a little bit more of the peptide in than others. So I've really narrowed it down now, the companies that I like to use. And the price point made it much easier for us to be able to use peptides longer term. One thing I have to warn you about, it's kind of different buying peptides due to the FDA restrictions. Most of them don't take credit cards. So I have to use Zelle on some, Cash App on others. Some take Apple Pay. One actually wanted Bitcoin, which was very odd. So you have to get used to that. And it's a little bit nerve wracking when you haven't done that before. Like, can I really trust this company? So again, look at their reviews and look at people that are happy and that have received their product. Okay, if you decide to do research with any of these companies. So as far as our results now, we've been on them. I think I've done 3 rounds. My toe is in fantastic shape. I've gone to another doctor who said everything the other doctor told me was not true, that I actually did have space in my toe, that I didn't need to get anything done yet because I have decent mobility now. And even though I have a bone spur, it's not really impacting anything. So he said, as long as I'm doing what's working, just to keep it up, and that if I get to the point where the pain comes back or I don't have enough mobility, he could give me a joint replacement in my toe. So I was really happy to get that response and to have a doctor that was willing to work with me and not just do the easy thing. And as far as Sam's shoulder goes, he had very limited range of motion. It hurt him a lot. It hurt when he slept. And now he's got to the point where his range of motion is much better. He can sleep without laying it on a pillow, and knees and ankles. Everything has gotten way better. So we both are definitely fans of peptides and have had good luck that we're really happy with. So from my perspective, I'm loving my BPC and my TB-500. So as far as dosing goes, my original, and this is kind of where they started me because I had a fairly new wound or injury, I guess you could call it. So you start out a little bit stronger. So the research companies don't give you dosing. They don't give you any instructions. You just have to figure it out. But there are places you can go to find that information. But this company gave me all the instructions. So it came with a Wolverine blend. That was BPC-157, 5 milligrams, TB-500, 5 milligrams. So total peptide volume of 10 milligrams. And then their instructions for reconstitution. And what that is, so it comes in a little vial, vacuum sealed vial with powder. And you have to make that powder liquid. So then you get this bacteriostatic water. My lights just came on. You get this bacteriostatic water that keeps bacteria basically from growing in the solution once it's created. And for this one, I added 2 milliliters or 200 units in the needle I was using to my vial. And you don't shake it because the peptides are very fragile. So you just swirl it around. And then per injection, I did 10 units. So that was 250 micrograms of BPC-157 and TB-500 each, totaling 500 micrograms. And per day, what I did was 10 units twice daily. So total daily exposure was 500 micrograms each of both of those peptides. So now what I've done, because of what I was talking to you all about TB-500 working differently, having a longer half-life in your system than the BPC, I have now separated the peptides. And I'm also on more of a maintenance dose because I don't feel the need to take such a high dose now that my toe is, performing more the way I wanted it and it doesn't hurt me anymore. If it does, then I'll bump up the dose if it starts to hurt some more. But right now, this is what's working for me. So I get the BPC-157. I get a 10 milligram vial. And again, if you're looking at my numbers, there's different size vials out there you could buy. So if you buy a 5 milligram vial, it's going to be different reconstitution. Your total units in micrograms are going to equal something different than mine. So just be aware of the math. So with this, I do 2 milliliters of water again, or 200 units for reconstitution, which gives me 10 units at 500 micrograms. And what I'm doing for my maintenance dose is 5 units 2 times a day. Then for the TB-500, still a 10 microgram vial, but because I don't want to have to put so much in each injection, I only reconstitute with 1 milliliter of water. And then I take a smaller dose. So now I have 20 units, which equal 2 micrograms. And I dose that 2 milligrams twice a week. There's no universally agreed upon maintenance dose out there. So everything you hear is just people's suggestions or what people have experienced. The goal is to use the smallest amount you need without having any pain or to maintain your good results. Final thoughts on what it's done for my toe and his shoulder is, it's given me my ability to do the things I want to do again. I mean, it was really affecting my quality of life as far as being able to exercise, even go on walks. Even, we'd go on a cruise and it was hard to dance because my toe hurt. And then with Sam, just being able to sleep better because his shoulder doesn't hurt him every time he moves. So it's been such a godsend to find these peptides. And I'm so glad that I took them. But again, this is my experience. Everybody reacts differently to different chemicals. It's not medical advice. It's my research and my experiences. I can't give you medical advice for your body. I just want to let you know what I experienced and how it impacted my life. I'd love to know in the comments. I'm curious to know how many people that watch my videos are actually taking peptides. And if you are, which ones you're on. And then for the next video, I'm thinking about doing another one on peptides. And I'd like to know which one you would like to know more about. So the 2 I'm thinking about, because everybody pretty much knows the weight loss ones right now. So I kind of like to go over one that's kind of more unique. So I'm looking at maybe it's one called GHCKU, which is more copper. That people think of as good for the hair and the skin and also for wound healing. Or there's SS31, which is more for healing the mitochondria and for helping with the brain and for brain health. And it's really, I've got my mom on it and it's really helped her memory. Let me know which of those 2 you'd be interested in hearing about, and that will set the direction for my next podcast. So thank you for watching. And in the meantime, stay ageless.